Friday, 5th of February, 1943. Dear Kitty, although I haven't written anything about our Rose for a long time, there still isn't any change. The discord, long accepted by us, struck Mr. Dussel as a calamity at first, but he is getting used to it now, and tries not to think about it. Margot and Peter aren't a bit what you would call young. They are both so staid and quiet. I show up terribly against them, and am always hearing, "You don't find Margot and Peter doing that. Why don't you follow their example?" I simply loathe it. I might tell you, I don't want to be in the least like Margot. She is much too soft and passive for my liking, and allows everyone to talk her round, and gives in about everything. I want to be a stronger character. But I keep such ideas to myself. They would only laugh at me if I came along with this as an explanation of my attitude. The atmosphere at table is usually strained, though luckily the outbursts are sometimes checked by the soup-eaters. The soup-eaters are the people from the office who come in and are served with a cup of soup. This afternoon Mr. Van Daan was talking about Margot eating so little again. "I suppose you do it to keep slim," he added, teasing her. Mummy, who always defends Margot, said loudly, "I can't bear your stupid chatter any longer." Mr. Van Daan turned scarlet, looked straight in front of him, and said nothing. We often laughed about things. Just recently Mrs. Van Daan came out with some perfect nonsense. She was recalling the past, how well she and her father got on together, and what a flirt she was. "And you know," she went on, "if a man gets a bit aggressive, my father used to say, then you must say to him, 'Mr. So-and-so, remember, I am a lady,' and he will know what you mean." We thought that was a good joke, and burst out laughing. Peter, too, although usually so quiet, sometimes gives cause for mirth. He is blessed with a passion for foreign words, although he does not always know their meaning. One afternoon we couldn't go to the lavatory because there were visitors in the office. However, Peter had to pay an urgent call, so he didn't pull the plug. He put a notice up on the lavatory door to warn us, with "SVP gas" on it. Of course he meant to put "Beware of gas," but he thought the other looked more genteel. He hadn't got the faintest notion it meant "If you please. Yours, Anne." Saturday, 27th of February, 1943. Dear Kitty, Pym is expecting the invasion any day. Churchill has had pneumonia, but is improving slowly. The freedom-loving Gandhi of India is holding his umpteenth fast. Mrs. Van Daan claims to be fatalistic. But who is the most scared when the guns go off? No one else but Petronella. Hank brought a copy of the bishop's letter to the churchgoers for us to read. It's very fine and inspiring. Do not rest, people of the Netherlands. Everyone is fighting with his own weapons to free the country, the people, and their religion. Give help, be generous, and do not dismay, is what they cry from the pulpit, just like that. Will it help? It won't help the people of our religion. You'd never guess what has happened to us now. The owner of these premises has sold the house without informing Crowler and Kufus. One morning, the new owner arrived with an architect to have a look at the house. Luckily, Mr. Kufus was present and showed the gentleman everything except the secret annex. He professed to have gotten the key of the communicating door. The new owner didn't question any further. It will be all right as long as he doesn't come back and want to see the secret annex, because then it won't look too good for us. Daddy has emptied a card index box for Margot and me and put cards in it. It is to be a book card system. Then we both write down which books we have read, who they are by, etc. I have procured another little notebook for foreign words. Lately, Mummy and I have been getting on better together, but we still never confide in each other. Margot is more catty than ever, and Daddy has got something he is keeping to himself, but he remains the same darling. New butter and margarine rationings at table. Each person has their little bit of fat put on their plate. In my opinion, the Van Daans don't divide it fairly. However, my parents are much too afraid of a row to say anything about it. Pity. I think you should always give people like them, tit for tat. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, 10th of March, 1943. Dear Kitty, we had a short circuit last evening, and on top of that, the guns kept banging away all the time. I still haven't got over my fear of everything connected with shooting and planes, and I creep into Daddy's bed nearly every night for comfort. I know it's very childish, but you don't know what it's like. The AA guns roar so loudly that you can't hear yourself speak. Mrs. Van Daan, the fatalist, was nearly crying, and said in a very timid little voice, "Oh, it is so unpleasant! Oh, they are shooting so hard!" By which she really means, "I'm so frightened." It didn't seem nearly so bad by the candlelight as in the dark. I was shivering, just as if I had a temperature, and begged Daddy to light the candle again. He was relentless. The light remained off. Suddenly there was a burst of machine-gun fire, and that is 10 times worse than guns. Mummy jumped out of bed, and, to Pim's annoyance, lit the candle. When he complained, her answer was firm. After all, Anne's not exactly a veteran soldier, and that was the end of it. Have I already told you about Mrs. Van Daan's other fears? I don't think so. If I am to keep you informed of all that happens in the secret annex, you must know about this too. One night, Mrs. Van Daan thought she heard burglars in the attic. She heard loud footsteps and was so frightened that she woke her husband. Just at that moment the burglars disappeared, and the only sounds that Mr. Van Daan could hear were the heartbeats of the frightened fatalist herself. "Oh, Pooty," Mr. Van Daan's nickname, "they are sure to have taken the sausages and all our peas and beans. And Peter, I wonder if he is still safely in bed." "They certainly won't have stolen Peter. Listen, don't worry and let me go to sleep." But nothing came of that. Mrs. Van Daan was far too nervous to sleep another wink. A few nights after that whole Van Daan family was woken by ghostly sounds. Peter went up to the attic with a torch, and scamper, scamper! What do you think it was running away? A swarm of enormous rats! We knew who the thieves were. We let Moshe sleep in the attic, and the uninvited guests didn't come back again, at least not during the night. Peter went up to the loft a couple of evenings ago to fetch some old newspapers. He had to hold the trap-door firmly to get down the steps. He put his hand down without looking, and went tumbling down the ladder from the sudden shock and pain. Without knowing it, he had put his hand on a large rat, and it had bitten him hard. By the time he reached us, as white as a sheet, with his knees knocking, the blood had soaked through his pajamas. And no wonder. It is not very pleasant to stroke a large rat, and to get bitten into the bargain is really dreadful. Yours, Anne. Friday, 12th of March, 1943. Dear Kitty, may I introduce someone to you? Mamma Frank, champion of youth. Extra butter for the young. The problems of modern youth. Mummy defends youth in everything, and after a certain amount of squabbling, she always gets her way. A bottle of preserved sole has gone bad. Gala dinner for Moshe and Boosh. You haven't met Boosh yet, although she was here before we went into hiding. She is the warehouse and office cat, and keeps down the rats in the storerooms. Her odd political name requires an explanation. For some time the firm had 2 cats, one for the warehouse and one for the attic. Now, it occasionally happened that the 2 cats met, and the result was always a terrific fight. The aggressor was always the warehouse cat, yet it was always the attic cat who managed to win, just like among nations. So the storehouse cat was named the German, or Boosh, and the attic cat the English, or Tommy. Tommy was got rid of later. We are all entertained by Boosh when we go downstairs. We have eaten so many kidney beans and haricot beans that I can't bear the sight of them any more. The mere thought of them makes me feel quite sick. Bread is no longer served in the evenings now. Daddy has just said that he doesn't feel in a good mood. His eyes look so sad again. Poor soul! I can't drag myself away from a book called The Knock at the Door by Ina Luder Baker. The story of the family is exceptionally well written. Apart from that, it is about war, riders, the emancipation of women, and quite honestly, I'm not awfully interested. Horrible air raids on Germany. Mr. Van Daan is in a bad mood. The cause? Cigarette shortage. Discussions over questions of whether we should or should not use our canned vegetables ended in our favor. I can't get into a single pair of shoes anymore, except ski boots, which are not much use about the house. A pair of rush sandals, costing 6.5 florins, lasted me just 1 week, after which they were out of action. Perhaps Miep will scrounge something under the counter. I must cut Daddy's hair. Pim maintains that he will never have another barber after the war, as I do the job so well. If only I didn't snip his ear so often. Yours, Anne. Thursday, 18th of March, 1943. Dear Kitty, Turkey is in the war. Great excitement. Waiting in suspense for the news. Yours, Anne. Friday, 19th of March, 1943. Dear Kitty, an hour later joy was followed by disappointment. Turkey is not in the war yet. It was only a cabinet minister talking about them soon giving up their neutrality. A newspaper in the dam was crying, "Turkey on England's side." The newspaper was torn out of his hands. This is how the joyful news reached us too. 500 and 1,000 guilder notes have been declared no longer valid. It is a trap for black marketeers and such like, but even more for people who have got other kinds of black money, and for people in hiding. If you wish to hand in 1,000 guilder note, you must be able to declare and prove exactly how you got it. They may still be used to pay taxes, but only until next week. Dussel has received an old-fashioned, foot-operated dentist drill. I expect he'll soon give me a thorough check-over. The Führer Allgemein has been talking to wounded soldiers. Listening into it was pitiful. Question and answer went something like this. My name is Herrn Schempel. Wounded where? Near Stalingrad. What kind of wound? 2 feet frozen off, and a broken joint in the left arm. This is exactly what the frightful puppet show on the radio was like. The wounded seemed to be proud of their wounds. The more, the better. One of them felt so moved at being able to shake hands with the Führer, that is, if he still had a hand, that he could hardly get the words out of his mouth. Yours, Anne. Thursday, 25th of March, 1943. Dear Kitty, yesterday, Mummy, Daddy, Margot, and I were sitting pleasantly together when suddenly Peter came in and whispered something in Daddy's ear. I heard something about a barrel fallen over in the warehouse, and someone fumbling about the door. Margot had heard it too, but when Daddy and Peter went off immediately, she tried to calm me down a bit, because I was naturally as white as a sheet and very jittery. The 3 of us waited in suspense. A minute or 2 later, Mrs. Van Daan came upstairs. She'd been listening to the wireless in the private office. She told us that Pim had asked her to turn off the wireless and go softly upstairs. But you know what that's like. If you want to be extra quiet, then each step of the old stairs creaks twice as loudly. 5 minutes later, Pim and Peter appeared again, white to the roots of their hair, and told us their experiences. They had hidden themselves under the stairs and waited, with no results at first. But suddenly, yes, I must tell you, they heard 2 loud bumps, just as if 2 doors were banged here in the house. Pim was upstairs in one leap. Peter warned Dussel first, who finally landed upstairs with a lot of fuss and noise. Then we all went up into the stockade, feet to the Van Daans on the next floor. Mr. Van Daan had a bad cold and had already gone to bed, so we all drew up closely round his bed and whispered our suspicions to him. Each time Mr. Van Daan coughed loudly, Mrs. Van Daan and I were so scared that we thought we were going to have a fit. That went on until one of us got the bright idea of giving him some codeine, which soothed the cough at once. Again we waited and waited, but we heard no more, and finally we all came to the conclusion that the thieves had taken to their heels when they heard footsteps in the house, which was otherwise so silent. Continue, page 73 and 74.